There is something happening inside your brain right now that your doctor cannot see on a standard blood test, and that most people will not recognize until it is far too late. Dementia does not announce itself. It does not send a calendar invite. It moves silently through the architecture of your brain for years, sometimes decades, dismantling circuits one by one while you go about your life completely unaware. By the time the memory problems become obvious enough to trigger a diagnosis, neurologists estimate that up to 40% of the brain's functional tissue in affected regions is already gone. That is not a typo. 40%. Destroyed before anyone even starts looking. But here's the part that changes everything. The warning signs begin long before the memory collapses. Long before you forget a name or lose a word mid-sentence. The brain sends up flares, quiet ones, easy to dismiss, easy to attribute to stress or aging or a bad night of sleep. Today, we are going to walk through every single one of them. And pay close attention, because sign number 10 is the one that makes neurologists stop the conversation and order tests immediately. Sign number 1. Your sense of smell has been quietly fading. Not dramatically, not all at once. But you notice that your morning coffee does not smell the way it used to, or that the garden after rain has lost something, some sharpness it once had. Most people chalk this up to allergies or congestion. Neurologists do not. A landmark study out of the University of Chicago followed more than 3,000 older adults and found that those who struggled to identify basic, everyday smells were more than twice as likely to be diagnosed with dementia within 5 years. Twice as likely. The reason this matters so much is anatomical. The olfactory bulb, the structure that processes smell, sits in direct physical contact with the hippocampus and the entorhinal cortex. These are two of the earliest regions that dementia attacks. When those cells begin dying, the smell signal degrades before anything else does. Your nose is essentially wired into the most vulnerable real estate in your brain. So if your world has been smelling a little flatter lately, a little less vivid, that is not nothing. That is your brain asking for help. Sign number 2. Your sleep has been falling apart in ways that feel impossible to fix. Not just the occasional bad night, a persistent grinding pattern where falling asleep takes forever, where you wake up at 3 in the morning with your mind already running, where you spend 8 hours in bed and drag yourself out of it, feeling like you barely rested at all. Here's why this matters at a neurological level. During deep sleep, your brain activates what researchers call the glymphatic system. Think of it as a biological pressure wash. Cerebrospinal fluid is pumped through the spaces between brain cells, flushing out metabolic waste. And the primary target of that cleaning cycle is amyloid beta, the same toxic protein that accumulates into the plaques found in Alzheimer's disease. When your sleep architecture breaks down, the cleaning crew cannot finish the job. The waste builds up, and here is the trap. That accumulating waste then further degrades the sleep centers themselves, which means your sleep gets worse, which means more waste builds up, which means more damage, which means worse sleep. It is a cycle that feeds itself. Most people treat disrupted sleep as a productivity problem. Neurologists treat it as a biological emergency. Sign number 3. Your handwriting has gotten smaller. Pull out something you wrote by hand 5 years ago. A birthday card, a grocery list, anything. Compare it to something you write today. If your letters are noticeably tighter, more cramped, harder to read, this has a clinical name, micrographia, and it is a documented neurological warning sign. The motor circuits responsible for handwriting are housed largely in the basal ganglia, a set of structures deep inside the brain that coordinate automatic fluid movement. As these circuits begin to degrade, the brain loses its ability to scale movement properly. Everything contracts. The letters get smaller because the system generating the motion is generating less of it. What makes this sign so valuable is that you can actually compare it over time. Most neurological decline is invisible until it is catastrophic. Handwriting leaves a record. Sign number 4. You cannot multitask the way you used to. There was a time when you could have 3 things running simultaneously and keep track of all of them. Now, if someone speaks to you while you're doing something, one of those 2 things immediately falls apart. You lose the thread. You forget what you were doing. You have to restart. This is the frontal lobes beginning to lose their organizational power. The prefrontal cortex, which sits right behind your forehead, is the brain's executive director. It holds multiple streams of information open at the same time, coordinates between them, and keeps you on task. When dementia begins eroding this region, those parallel processing channels close down one by one. You are not becoming distracted. You are losing the hardware that made simultaneous processing possible in the first place. Sign number 5. Your arm swing has changed. This one requires you to actually pay attention to your own body in motion. The next time you walk past a mirror or a shop window, watch both arms. Do they swing naturally, alternating with your steps, loose and automatic? Or is one arm hanging slightly stiffer, moving less than the other? Or are both arms quieter than they should be, sort of trailing along without that natural pendulum rhythm? Arm swing is not something you consciously control. It is generated by automatic motor programs running in the basal ganglia and the motor cortex. When these programs begin degrading, the swing diminishes before any visible tremor or stiffness appears. This makes it an extraordinarily early signal. Most people never think to look for it. Most people never look at their own arms while they walk. Start looking. Sign number 6. The things you used to love have lost their pull. You had hobbies, you had rituals, a weekly card game, a woodworking project, a book club you actually looked forward to. And somewhere along the line, the motivation just evaporated. You tell yourself you're tired. You tell yourself you will get back to it. But weeks become months. This is not laziness and it is not depression, although it can be mistaken for it. What is actually happening is the deterioration of the dopamine reward circuits in the midbrain. These circuits are responsible for generating the anticipatory pleasure that makes you want to do things before you do them. When they degrade, activities that once produced a genuine internal reward start feeling neutral. The wanting disappears before the doing even gets a chance. That loss of wanting is a brain circuit failing, not a personality shift. Sign number 7. Your visual and spatial judgment has been slipping. You clip the corner of the door frame more than you used to. You misjudge the distance when you reach for your glass. Parking the car requires more concentration, more correction. Your eyes are not the problem here. The visual information coming in through your retinas is exactly the same. The problem is what happens to that information once it reaches your brain. The occipital and parietal lobes are responsible for processing raw visual data into a usable map of space, calculating depth, distance, and the location of objects relative to your body. When these regions begin to degenerate, the raw data arrives, but the map gets built wrong. Objects are where your eyes say they are, but where your brain thinks they are is slightly off. Sign number 8. Complex stories and conversations are starting to lose you. Television shows. You would have followed easily now feel like they are one step ahead of you. You cannot keep track of who knows what, which characters have which motivations, how the pieces connect. In conversations, you follow the individual sentences, but lose the thread of where the whole thing is going. The temporal lobes process language and build what neurologists call narrative coherence, the ability to take a sequence of events and assemble them into a meaningful story. When these regions begin degrading, individual pieces of information come in fine, but the architecture that holds them together starts to collapse. People usually blame the show for being too complicated. The show has not changed. Sign number 9. Your reaction time has slowed noticeably. Not just a little slower. Slow in ways that feel foreign, like the gap between what you see and what your body does has been stretched out by half a second you cannot account for. This is not muscle weakness. Your muscles respond the same way they always have. What is slowed is the chain of processing between perception and command. The speed at which your neural circuits fire depends on the integrity of the myelin sheath, the insulating layer wrapped around nerve fibers, and the efficiency of your neurotransmitter systems. As neurodegeneration advances, both of these degrade. The signal travels the same distance but takes longer to get there. People dismiss this as aging. Neurologists do not dismiss it. Processing speed is one of the most sensitive early markers of what is happening underneath. And now, sign number 10, the one that makes clinicians lean forward and pay very close attention. Subtle but persistent personality shifts, not dramatic, not a sudden transformation. But your family has noticed something. You are quicker to irritate. You make a comment in a social situation that you would never have made before. Something a little too blunt, a little too unfiltered. You feel less empathy for things that used to move you. Or you have become more suspicious, more withdrawn, less recognizably yourself. These changes are happening because the frontal lobes, which regulate impulse control, social judgment, and emotional calibration, are among the very first regions that dementia begins to compromise. The circuits that make you patient, that make you measure your words, that generate empathy on contact, those circuits are built from biological tissue. And that tissue can degrade. When it does, the personality does not stay fixed. It drifts, slowly, in ways that the person experiencing it often cannot see, but that the people closest to them absolutely can. This is not a character flaw. This is not a choice. It is a neurodegenerative process wearing a mask of personality change. Here is the single most important thing to take away from all of this. Every sign on this list appears years before the clinical diagnosis. In many cases, a decade or more before. The diagnosis happens when memory failure becomes impossible to ignore. But the biological process that causes that failure has been running in the background the entire time, dismantling infrastructure while the person carries on with their life thinking everything is basically fine. That window between first signs and diagnosis is not a waiting room. It is an intervention window. The brain is not a static organ. It has the capacity to build new connections, to reroute around damage, to slow and in some cases partially reverse early degeneration when given the right inputs. Movement, real cardiovascular effort that floods the brain with oxygen and triggers BDNF, the growth factor that literally builds new neural connections. Nutrition that removes inflammation and provides the raw materials for repair. Sleep that actually completes its cleaning cycle, and cognitive challenge that forces your neural circuits to stay active instead of quietly going dark from disuse. The brain can fight back, but it needs you to recognize what is happening first. If any of these signs are showing up in your life or in someone you love, take it seriously, not with panic, with urgency, because the window that is open right now will not stay open forever. Let me know in the comments which of these signs surprised you the most, and if this video opened your eyes to something you had been dismissing, hit like so more people have the chance to see it before it is too late.